In the 1930s, the US Army was undergoing a process of reorganization and rearmament due to concerns over the potential outbreak of another large-scale war. As part of this effort, they sought the development of a new lightweight all-wheel drive motor vehicle for reconnaissance purposes. The solution to this request would become one of the most iconic military vehicles in history, the famous Jeep. Produced in such vast numbers, it was adapted for a wide range of roles, including simple transport, offensive operations with various armaments, medical evacuation, and command functions, to name some. Virtually every role was covered except flight. Or was it? The British experimented with the idea of airdropping vehicles using experimental rotor kites. Given the Jeep's abundance, they decided to use it in an attempt to create a rather bizarre flying vehicle. The story of this unusual contraption begins with Hafner, an Austrian rotor kite enthusiast. But what exactly is a rotor kite? Essentially, it was an unpowered rotary wing aircraft that shared many design features with later helicopters. Unlike helicopters, however, rotor kites couldn't take off on their own. Instead, they had to be towed into the air by a larger aircraft or ground vehicle, relying on wind to keep their rotors spinning. While inexpensive to build, they were never widely adopted. Hafner was born in Austria in 1905 and developed an early passion for rotorcraft design. In 1928, he collaborated with Bruno Nagler on an early helicopter prototype. By the early 1930s, he had emigrated to the United Kingdom, where he began working on gyroplanes, eventually designing a functional prototype known as the Hafner AR-3 gyroplane. He continued refining his designs, but with the outbreak of World War II, his Austrian origins led to his temporary imprisonment. Upon his release, Hafner began working on a solution to Britain's shortage of parachute materials. His goal was to develop an inexpensive one-man rotor kite as a possible replacement. The core principle behind his concept was that, given the scarcity of materials required for parachute production, a small, easy-to-build and simple-to-control rotor kite could serve as a cost-effective alternative. These kites were designed to be towed into the air by another aircraft and then released near the designated target. This led to the development of a prototype series known as the Hafner Rotoshoot. While promising, the concept never progressed beyond a limited number of experimental models. Expanding on this idea, Hafner asked himself, if a rotor kite could safely land a soldier, why not his motor transport as well? Hafner theorized that his rotor kite design could be expanded and enlarged to allow for the airlifting and deployment of light vehicles. If successful, this would provide paratroopers with a means of transportation, increasing their mobility and thus effectiveness in combat. The design was intended to be as simple as possible. A standard light vehicle, left largely unmodified, would be partially enclosed within an aerodynamic fuselage to provide lift and protect the crew. A rotary assembly would be mounted on top, while a large tail section at the rear would ensure lateral stability. Upon landing, the crew would discard the fuselage, leaving the vehicle fully operational and ready for immediate use. In 1942, with this concept in mind, Hafner approached the central landing establishment. At first glance, attaching a makeshift rotary wing to a lightweight wheeled vehicle might have seemed like a recipe for disaster. However, the idea was not as reckless as it appeared. Finding an effective way to transport light vehicles over long distances could offer a significant combat advantage, especially at a time when the Allies were developing plans for an invasion of occupied France. Airdropping troops and equipment was expected to play a key role in such operations, making Hafner's proposal worth exploring. Recognizing its potential, the central landing establishment approved further development. Now, Hafner needed a suitable light chassis for the job. Fortunately, he didn't have to search for long. The perfect solution was already in the hands of Britain's ally across the Atlantic. This is where the US Jeep enters the story. As mentioned earlier, the US Army sought a new light all-wheel drive vehicle primarily for reconnaissance operations. Initially, motorcycles were introduced for this role. While they offered advantages over horses, they had significant limitations. Chiefly, their limited carrying capacity, as they could only transport the driver and a single passenger. It soon became clear that a larger, more capable vehicle was needed. One potential solution was the development of small, relatively inexpensive all-wheel drive light vehicles. Throughout the 1930s, the Army conducted extensive testing of various designs. After numerous trials, Willys Overland Motors design, the Willys MB, commonly referred to as the Jeep, was selected as the Army's standard lightweight reconnaissance vehicle. Production began in 1941, and by the war's end in 1945, over 600,000 had been built. The Jeep saw widespread service across the globe during and after the war, with many still in running order today. The Jeep was widely exported to Allied nations, including the UK, which received tens of thousands. Even the Soviet Union acquired them and eventually developed its own variant. Given the vast stockpile of these vehicles, it is unsurprising that Hafner chose one for his experiment. For the construction of the working prototype, he approached R. Malcolm Limited, a small company that had been building aircraft components during the war. With the base component selected, work on the prototype began, and it was likely completed by mid-1943. The unusual vehicle went by many names. The Air Ministry designated it as the ML-10/42 Special Rotating Wing Glider, while others called it the Malcolm Rotorplane, Flying Jeep or Blitz Buggy. However, it eventually became best known as the Hafner Rotabuggy. For the sake of simplicity, for this video, we will refer to it as the Rotabuggy. The overall design of the Rotabuggy was relatively simple. It was essentially a standard Jeep modified with an added fuselage to enable flight. During testing, it was determined that the Jeep could be dropped from a height of up to 2.35 meters without suffering major mechanical damage. However, there was always the risk of a rough landing damaging the vehicle after a successful flight. To mitigate this, the design had to ensure the Rotabuggy could withstand the impact of such a drop. The estimated rate of descent at 77 km an hour was 4.9 milliseconds. Essentially, it consisted of a standard Jeep with 4 metal bars arranged in a pyramidal shape at its base. Additional metal bars connected the front and rear pairs for extra support. A rotor unit was mounted atop this framework. Another metal frame was attached to the rear section, consisting of at least 4 long stringers reinforced with smaller crossbars. Surrounding this structure, a series of nearly circular frames, decreasing in size toward the tail, formed the fuselage. The structure forming the base of the fuselage was then covered with plywood for aerodynamics. The sides and top were essentially flat, without any noticeable features. Large windshields at the front and on the crew doors provided excellent all-around visibility, crucial for ensuring a controlled and safe landing. To enhance lateral stability, a large tail assembly was added to the rear of the vehicle. It featured 2 sizable twin fins, though notably these lacked rudders. Additionally, a small landing skid was positioned at the end of the tail. The Rotabuggy was operated by a 2-person crew, a driver and a pilot. The driver sat on the left side, maintaining the original Jeep configuration, while the pilot sat on the right. The pilot's role was to control the rotation of the rotor blades, which generated lift. For flight control, the pilot was equipped with a control column, a rotor tachometer, and a set of basic glider navigation instruments. Once on the ground, the Rotabuggy functioned like a standard Jeep. The rotor blades were notably long, measuring 14.22 meters in diameter. This created some issues during testing, as at least one incident occurred where the blade struck the rear tail assembly. Fortunately, no injuries were reported. The first flight trials of the Rotabuggy were scheduled for November 1943. These trials were planned to be conducted using a Diamond T 4-ton truck as a tug vehicle. This was seen as a simple, cost-effective and safer option given the prototype's early development stage. The flight tests were carried out on the 16th of November 1943. Despite numerous attempts, the crew was unable to get the Hafner Rotabuggy off the ground as they could not achieve the necessary speed to generate lift. Further testing resumed on November 27th, this time using a more powerful, though unspecified, tug vehicle. This attempt proved successful as the Rotabuggy was finally lifted into the air. The first flight using an actual tug aircraft, a Whitley bomber, was conducted in December 1943. However, the test quickly revealed design flaws. At a speed of 80 km an hour, severe vibrations developed, forcing the flight to be aborted to prevent an accident. Subsequent tests with a similar tug vehicle showed that the vibrations persisted at speeds of 70 km an hour and higher. During one flight, a rotor blade even struck the tail fin, causing damage. Following these issues, the Rotabuggy was temporarily grounded for repairs and modifications. By February 1944, the Rotabuggy successfully reached a speed of 112 km an hour. Numerous tests continued throughout the year, culminating in a major test flight on September 11, 1944. Towed to an altitude of 120 meters by a Whitley bomber, the vehicle was released. After a brief glitch, the pilot managed to land the vehicle, albeit with some difficulty. The extensive testing demonstrated considerable interest in the project. However, despite over a year of development, the Rotabuggy was ultimately cancelled. The reason was not a flaw in the concept itself, but rather the emergence of a more practical alternative. Britain had begun mass-producing gliders such as the Waco CG-4, which could transport a Jeep within their fuselage. With this new capability, the Rotabuggy was rendered obsolete. Although the Rotabuggy's project ended in failure, Hafner's career did not. Recognised for his expertise in rotorcraft design, he was appointed chief designer and head of the newly established helicopter division at Bristol. His contributions to early British helicopter development were instrumental in producing aircraft such as the Type 171 Sycamore and the large tandem-rotor Bristol Belvedere. He was also among the first aircraft engineers to receive the Dr. Alexander Klemin Award, a prestigious honour in the field of vertical flight aeronautics. Tragically, in 1980, Hafner disappeared at sea when his boat went missing and he was never found. As the Rotabuggy never advanced beyond the prototype stage, it's unsurprising that the vehicle didn't survive to the present day. The prototype was eventually restored to its original Jeep configuration. However, as a testament to this intriguing design concept, a replica was built by the Wessex Aviation Society and is now on display at the British Museum of Army Flying in Middle Wallop, Hampshire. This concludes our look at an interesting attempt to develop an alternative method for transporting personnel and light vehicles using a rotor kite. What do you think of this technology? Did it have any merit? And do you think further research and improvements would have been worthwhile? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you're interested in exploring more bizarre and unique aircraft designs, make sure to visit our YouTube channel for more content. If you enjoy what we do and want to see more, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any future videos. Also, be sure to check out the ever-growing collection of articles on our website, plane-encyclopedia.com. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.